Hi guys. Can you see me? And please reply and then go ahead and turn on your cameras. Great. All right. So, I hope all is well wherever you guys are. So we're gonna do the same thing right now that we did yesterday. So we're gonna break up into pairs, and then you're gonna take 20 minutes to make sure you have the section 1.3 straight for the AR5 report, and then in 20 minutes we'll come back. And so you guys are going to chat. So I'm going to list you off in terms of your pairs, and we're going to go ahead and do that. So let's see. Okay, so and I think everybody is here. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. So Saad, you're going to be with Ricky. So just reply yes that you both caught that. Okay. I don't think he's there. Let me see. Okay, Saad, did you get that? And I'm assuming you can hear me? Okay, there we go. He just joined. Okay, so Saad, you're going to be with Ricky going over the report. Okay, so just tell me that you got that. Okay, so Ricky, just try to reach him basically. Yeah, okay, there we go. Okay, good. So you guys are a pair. Um, Chloe, you're going to be with Evan. Monica, you're going to be with Lily. And just reply that you got that. Okay. And then Chujuan, you're going to be with Cristobal. All right, Cristobal, yeah, got it. Okay. Then Christian, you're going to be with Christopher. Yeah. Okay. Christopher, did you get that? So just try to make sure you guys get together. Okay, good. Let's see. Then, okay, Cristobal, did I assign you yet or no? Yes, I did. Okay. So then Carolina, you're gonna be with Callie. Okay. And then Aichi, you're gonna be with Ye. Okay, great. And then Jiyoung, you're gonna be with Alex. Okay, great. So you guys can turn off your cameras if you want, and then you've got 20 minutes. So it's 11:05 my time. So we'll reconvene in 20 minutes, 11:25 Pacific time. So go for it in the chat. Okay. All right. So turn on your cameras and let's start. All right. So I'm going to share the screen like we did last time. Let's see. Hopefully it'll work well. All right. So I'm assuming you guys can see this 1.3.1. All right. So just nod your head yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Um, all right. So how about Saad, you can go ahead and start that section for us. 1.3.1. Tell us about what that says overall. Okay, so Saad's gonna write. So the screen then for me has to be back on the chat. So um, I can't show you the graph, but go ahead and then Saad, say what you're gonna say, and then we'll go back to um, the report and look. One, I just said that we started and Saad is writing right now. So he's going to start with the very first part of 1.3. Okay, so you're talking about the first graph in that section. Right. Uh, keep going. What else? Right. So I'm going to go to the graph now. So what we see in figure 1.9 is, so the black uh, rectangle is what we know. So the data that we have from observation stations around the world, that's in black. And that has a pretty strong confidence. So this is what we've seen. So we see in degrees Celsius, temperature change has occurred over those 20 years by this much, over half a degree Celsius. That's more in Fahrenheit. And so when we break that down, what we see is you have um, what the authors are trying to do is trying to attribute how this breaks down in respect to greenhouse gases and other anthropogenic forcings. And it's this is very difficult to do, to tease apart what is providing such a result, right? And that's why you have the error bars in black much longer for both of those. And the reason, so greenhouse gases in green have increased our temperature, and then the other anthropogenic forcings in yellow include the aerosol effect, so which temporarily decreases the temperature by increasing reflectivity in the clouds. And so that has a negative effect. And so if you just combine those two in orange, then that basically is that sum. It's that sum with a lower error bar that you see. And the two really small, I guess, natural forcings and internal variability is it's just giving you, even with the error bars, if you look, right, the degree to any even maximally possible impacts that naturally occur are incredibly minimal compared to what we have done in green. I mean, just look, compare green to natural forcings or to natural internal variability. It's a staggering difference. You can't even see the box for those bottom two. And yet, this is what we have up top in those four boxes. So that's the main point in this graph. So do you guys understand that? So good. So now, thanks, Todd. So now we're going to go on to further down and tackle this one, figure 1.1. 0. So let's have Ricky tell us what is going on here and what are we looking at? Okay, so you have no mic. Okay, so you're going to write, I'm assuming? Okay, go for it. Mm-hmm. Right. Um, so looking here, that's exactly what we see. So yellow boxes are land, blue boxes are oceans, and blue, the blue highlighted um, part, like you've said, is um, natural causes, and pink is both natural and human or anthropogenic. That's what it means, by the way. Anthropogenic means human caused effects. So that's exactly it. And it seems like there's no part of the world that hasn't been affected, right? Um, looking in that sum, the three bottom graphs, the global averages for land and ocean, and then ocean heat content. These are major changes. So ocean heat content is obviously in different units. It's in joules, so energy, and the land and ocean temperatures are monitored, and the results are very similar. There's nothing where you have an increase in temperature that's not being affected, that's not affecting some other part, right? So all across the world, and both on land and in the water, we're getting the same readouts, and yet the challenges are the specific challenges are a little bit different for each, whether it's land or ocean. And so we'll we'll look at that and explore that more later today and tomorrow. Um, all right, great. So, all right, section 1.3.2, observed impacts attributed to climate change. So let's have Monica take this.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So this section talked a lot about how all the things that we've done to accelerate climate change that would have naturally happened are really affecting all parts of the globe, especially in figure 1.11 part A, because that one especially shows that everyone has some sort of backlash from what we've been doing in destroying our environment. And like for part C, I think, it shows that we have lower crop yields from a lot of plants that we rely on for a lot of our food, except for soybeans. And that's kind of startling, especially because our population's still growing, but our food is going down. So that's not good. And although there haven't been as many like shown influences on human health, it's just because I think it said that it didn't do that as much, but there have been related deaths because of more heat instead of more cold. And all of this is just like cascading impacts on everything and everyone.
Right. Got it. Thank you. That was a great summary. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what we see. For part A, there's no part that's not affected. Polar regions, just because we don't do agriculture there, is the only reason there's not a tractor, icon there, but everything else is affected. You can't go somewhere where you don't have these problems. And even if they're not local, even if local destruction, of course, impacts like a wave first, something that's around it, it sadly, everything travels. There's weather patterns and ocean circulation, and that's why it's so important to know that we are all connected. There's no way to escape. You can't say, the situation with Japan, right, and the nuclear reactor, it's as if we didn't learn from Chernobyl in the Soviet Union, but we're still building. We're still building nuclear power plants. They're sometimes you don't even know they're there. There are, I believe, 5 in California alone. They're actually right. A lot of them are by the coastline as you make your drive down the coast, and you wouldn't even know because they're behind a big fence. And um, so, for example, what happened in Japan, now there are questions. Okay, so the water that's still leaking, right? So on the news, this is silenced. So we don't talk about this. So people won't panic and people won't make enormous changes radically. Because if people knew what was going on a daily basis in the world, then I think in a minute things would change. Because if you realize there are always more people than there are rulers, right? Than people on top, and that's really important to know. That those that are on top are really separated from any form of reality. They're kind of, it's almost like when you climb that ladder of power, um, you have to, you have to, you have to change. And you can never be as human, basically, as the people who live their daily lives in a much less protected way. And so, again, back to that the example with the power plant. So it's still leaking. It's leaking enormously. Things are still going into the water. There's the conserved estimates that the radiation will move through the ocean to the west coast in America. Um, they said that it would take probably 10 years. Now it's 5 years, and scientists are already catching fish and water samples that have that radiation. So those isotopes are there. And that doesn't even begin, it doesn't even begin to talk about because nobody, this, what we're talking about now is already in the past, right? So this report is a combination of so much research and so much data. But if you realize research always lags behind reality, right? It's usually about 10 to 20 years behind, and especially since scientists are caught in this trap where where they have to be conservative. Um, and it's a huge problem that I take personal offense with. But what the science that you're reading is conservative, right? Even after every sentence, you see maximum confidence, minimal confidence. Um, things are happening, for me, they're happening. And any kind of moderate language or any kind of professional withholding or any kind of news censorship um, is not something to be kind of lulled by. So that's what I urge you is to just keep in mind that everything that you're reading and seeing is already that's been collected for you, and that has a huge time lag. So things have been going on, and right now um, they're probably much worse. And so just keep that in mind. So when you listen to the news, I personally do not listen to any news because I find them totally useless and usually untrue and depressing. So I just do what I can, as much as I can, whether it's impacting my own family or students or any kind of community that I have reach into, and of course working on my own habits. But just keep in mind that what you see is probably 1,000th of the story that's really going on in the world with regards to everything. Um, but also because of that, it's really unreliable, and the negative feelings that it does give you is because news are sensationalist. And so there's really, if you if you want to feel more empowered and you want to start doing things, I recommend removing that drain on your positive energy um, away. So um, with that, dive in. Let's have um, uh, Jijuan tell us about figure B. So after what um, Monica talked about.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Go for it.
Seems good. All right. Um, the figure B. Actually, I do not quite understand its meaning, but uh, it is due to the axis. I see those um, kind of planktons and bacteria, something like that. Uh, I'm sorry, I don't understand quite.
Yeah. So try to tell us just a little bit more, and I'll take it from there.
Um, all right, how can I say that? Um, mm, mm, I'm sorry, I don't think I could get that. Um,
Okay. So what do you so for example, what are those so you have boxes and lines, right? And then boxes or circles, and then lines. And so the like the whiskers or the black lines we've talked about in other graphs. So what
uh,
is that most likely?
yeah, I know the circles and but I just don't know the meaning of the vertical axis. The left hand
Right,
one. I don't know
right. So yeah.
distribution change. Yeah.
Okay. So the y, it
Uh,
yeah, it is a very difficult graph. Um, these types of graphs are incredibly unintuitive, and I really don't. So don't worry about it. I really don't know how policymakers are who really generally don't have a scientific background, how they can read some of these graphs. But so what it is on the x-axis you have different forms of life, from very small algae, sometimes microscopic, to cnidarians, mollusks, crustacea, moving um, to bigger types of life. So different fish towards the right there. And on the y-axis, you have so these forms of life tend to live in certain parts um, of the ocean, and the ocean, obviously, depending on its depth, has different temperatures. So the deeper ocean is very cold, or ocean that has the continental shelf underneath it is probably has more chance to be warmed by the sun, and is warmer because it's more shallow. And so you have these forms of life living in different parts of the ocean, but with surface warming. And so you have um, overall you're increasing minutely, though, um, especially deep ocean temperatures, minutely you're increasing. Um, However, what you see is, so the 0 line, the x-axis line, is if there was no shift in the location of this animal life. And then anything above this corresponds to, so the dot or the square represents the animal taxa, and then on the left, on the y-axis, you see how many kilometers in a decade it has shifted into warmer water. So that's what's happening. So the secondary axis on the graph, so the second y-axis there, the warmer, cooler, is what that's signifying. So for example, you have, let's say, this point here in the center, that's the highest up, right? So that is phytoplankton. So these are really small organisms that serve as food for higher trophic levels. Pretty much, so the lower level, or the smaller the form of life, the more fundamental it is, because the more trophic levels above it depend on it, right? So smaller fish eat that, larger fish, larger fish, larger fish, sharks, for example, eat that. And so if you remove this bottom foundational life form, then all of the rest of the trophic levels that depend upon it can't survive. So, for example, if you remove a shark, so to speak, then the levels below it, all of those trophic levels, aren't necessarily as directly affected, right, as if you remove the phytoplankton. And so phytoplankton has moved, this is phenomenal, it's moved over 400 kilometers in the last decade. And overall, in red, so that kind of broken part of the graph, on the rightermost side, so all taxa, this is an average of all those points, has moved with a pretty strong confidence interval, because you can't really see the whiskers there. Excuse me. Have shifted right over 20 kilometers. So that's what you're seeing there. I know you were struggling, but so was everybody else. So thank you for that. So moving on, let's take a look at this one here, the big graph, the next big graph, 1.12. So let's have Cristobal tell us about that. No, I don't think we hear you. Yeah, so nothing yet. Okay, but try again right now. Right. Thank you. Yeah. So
So
that's strange. I'm
that's
getting
strange. I'm getting feedback
from my
from my
own.
own.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going
I'm going
to
to
leave and
leave
then come
and
back
then come
in.
back in.
All right. So, okay. So everyone can hear me now. It's fine. Yes? Yeah. Okay. So, right. So that's what this graph is about. So you have cryosphere has to do with it's like the lower microclimate above the Earth's surface, which includes rain and fresh water, that sort of thing. So all of these changes, which by the way, this graph is really good to kind of get your wheels going for the final project for when you talk about your destructive behavior that's yours or that you see someone else doing. This is a good graph to that kind of shows you all those different parts that you can talk about in the biology aspect, right, of the effect that you choose, of the behavior that you choose. And so all of these ultimately, so you have the effects of the right of climate change um, on the left, so direct effects, but then they're synonymous with effects on us, and it may take a few more boxes than they could actually put on this graph, right, in terms of the cascade um, of effects until it reaches us. But there's no way you can doubt that an effect on land, ocean, or cryosphere will not ultimately impact us. We're always at the end of this arrow. We're always going to be at the end of this arrow ultimately. There's no way this arrow won't reach us. So that's the big point there. You can go through as many processes and cycles and impacts sequentially, but the end box might as well have been humans all the way across the end, because there's no way that the end boxes shown here won't affect us in the end. So that was the biggest point there. Right, that's right, Christabel. Yeah, so indirect impacts. Yeah, it's amazing how um, people who I would say are still sleepwalking, and they tend to sometimes look at the data and they say, well, what is not being reported isn't happening. But it's actually the opposite. It's what isn't being reported that we haven't either learned to measure yet, don't know how to measure yet, haven't measured yet. Those things are most definitely still going on. So good point. Thanks, Christabel. So, okay, so someone had a question. I think Monica, no, or was it Carolina? Did you have a question? If so, you can just ask it. Yeah.
I was wondering, it says that very few quantifiable data has been collected about human effects climate change effects on human health.
Uh-huh.
But I was wondering, is there nothing related to vectors? Because, well, I've been hearing a lot that vector issues are increasing because of the warmer temperatures, at least here in my country. And I was wondering if there's no data to back that up.
So can you give an example for other people, and then I'll answer.
Well, here we've been having an epidemic of dengue fever, which is a vector-borne disease, and basically we're having a drought while also having a huge increase in mosquitoes. And yeah, it seems like it's counterintuitive, but that's what's happening. And they're estimating on 90,000 cases by the end of the year.
Wow, got it. Yeah. So so vectors are basically it just means a host. So a host that carries a disease causing agent like a bacteria, a yeast or a fungi, or a virus. So what we don't see is being carried by animals, or it's being carried by different. For example, that is so yes, that is not really, in my experience from the research that I've seen, paid as much attention, but there's definitely, and if you look, there's definitely enough evidence of this. I mean, for example, even in kind of when you look at from a non-medical standpoint, if you just go to the research on invasive species, like from the PowerPoint you saw yesterday, you see invasive plants coming in, and then there's a really good example of that that weed that ate the South, kudzu. So it is a vector. It's a viral vector for other plants and animals, and it's expanding its range. It's moving northward, and you already have cases of other plants and animals being affected, where before this weed was never in its region. And so you see that globally. You see that, for example, I mean, even, invasive species have come to us through transportation, right? So, for example, you have huge ships that carry those, they're cargo ships. So they carry those metal containers that are then loaded onto trucks, and transported right on land. And so those big metal ships serve as excellent hosts, as to transport barnacles. Barnacles are those like calcified little immobile organisms that you find living on rock in the ocean, in the intertidal, and so they get transported, and then these barnacles then are so invasive they smother all other species in areas where they've never been before, and that imbalance creates actually local local populations in the intertidal zone in other countries of small fish to then be susceptible. They get sick, and then it just keeps going. So there are so many different ways that hosts are acting now, because you see plant life, animal life, and toxins that are being transported all over the place. And so, of course, it's going to affect human life. And so, if you dig closer, you'll find that it's just that the research, the ecology research is there. It's probably the fact that the kind of the health research hasn't caught up with it again, and so that's why you're not finding it. It's definitely present. So good point. And then let's see, Lily had a question. Figure 1.11b, why do the non-bony fish move to the warmer part of the ocean instead of to the cooler one? So this is possibly a case where they, just like invasive weeds, where they're expanding their range. And another thing is if they are then able So some animals are much more resilient to temperature changes than others. These organisms, such as the purple sea urchin, they're called model organisms. And so it's possible that certain types of non-bony fish that were studied in that study actually are all right, do all right with that increased temperature, and so they expand their range. Another thing could be involuntary. There's a change that you wouldn't know from this, but there's also a change in the ocean circulation, in the ocean currents and rivers. That it's a global conveyor belt is what it's called. So it reaches the whole ocean, and so that's probably what you're seeing. And for example, so I swim in the ocean very often. It's something that I do here in California a lot. And I was just swimming a week ago, and when you walk on the beach is littered with small live baby lobsters. So they're about this big. They're really adorable. They're red, really cute, but they're on the coastline for miles. So about 100 miles worth of coastline on the shoreline is littered with live baby lobsters that have been washed out from thousands of miles away and have the current reshifted and moved them out here, and then they were just brought up onto the sand where they won't make it, right? So hopefully they'll be eaten by seabirds, but they were just everywhere. And then when you go in the water, they're swimming there with you, and they're beautiful, but they shouldn't be there. And that's a whole population. That's a whole generation of food for other fish, other animals, let alone us. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and you can hedge your bets that any part of a living process is being affected, rather than saying that let's find which ones are being affected. I think it's hard to find which ones are not. So yeah, so we're done then with section 1.3. So that's right, Lily. That's exactly what I'm saying. Not of their own accord. They don't move. Sometimes they aren't moving because that's the way they need to be. For another example, that's, they're all sad, but another example is, so sonar that's being used by the military, basically ships that they send out a certain energy frequency, like an ultrasound, to the bottom of the ocean. And so submarines have this. And so then when the waves are reflected back, you get a topography of the ocean floor. So when that signal comes back to the ship, you know how deep the water is based on, right, how long it took the signal to travel. So those different military uses, and even other ships are sadly using it now, they send signals that hit right in the middle of the frequency that is used by very old animal life. So it's used by whales and dolphins to communicate to each other, to find each other in thousands of miles of open ocean to mate. So that's interfering with their communication. So there's so much going on. Everything is being affected. So let me stop there. I want you guys to take just 10 minutes, same partners, look at the ocean acidification article, and we'll be back. So it's 12:15, 12:25. Come back. All right, you guys can go ahead in the chat. All right.
Okay, you guys, come back on, please. Can you hear me? I'm assuming no. Okay. Okay, you guys can hear me, right? Can you nod your head? Yeah, great, okay. Alrighty. So this article, it's a lot to take in. Scientific papers have their own language that you have to learn to read and to write this way. So it is a really big impediment, again, to having science come to the public, right? Because it's almost like, and I really believe that this is where it came from. It's as if speaking this different language allows you to kind of have your own in-group. It's like you're part of a club, right? You can write this way, you can read this, and it makes you feel more special. And on the flip side, because it's an ego thing, I think, in part, on the flip side is that, again, people, like regular people, can't read this. What the heck is this article saying? But I think if you persist, you can get the main points, right? And so that's all that you really need to know. So if you look on the very first page, you have the equation. So let me pull it up. Let's see if I have it here. There. So let me share the screen. One sec. Okay. So first page of the paper. Really, the only thing that's truly important is this equation right here. That's it. That's where it's at. This tells the whole story. So what this equation is showing is you have these three inputs, right? So this is a chemical reaction. You have CO2, which is your greenhouse gas. You have CO3, which is carbonate. And you have water. And so now this equation isn't a full equation, and that's why it's a bit confusing. And I actually, looking at it now, I think it's definitely not the best way to write it, because they could have filled this equation in more with more outputs. They're just showing the main output here after the chemical reaction, but they should have included everything so it would be clear. So mostly what happens is, yes, the ocean is a sink, right? And it's doing its job, and we'd be screwed much sooner if the ocean wasn't doing this, if it wasn't absorbing CO2. But the problem with that is it's changing ocean chemistry. So CO2 comes in, and it, the way that it works is it takes out, CO2 rearranges itself with water, and then it rearranges to form an extra, which you can't see here, form an extra hydrogen ion, okay? And so this hydrogen ion, one goes to the carbonate and one is free. So one floats freely, and this hydrogen ion, so the more hydrogen ions you have, like in a regular pH scale, the more acidic you will get. And so that's part one. The other part is that to form calcified shells, so if you think about all of the organisms, right, that have calcified shell, so that's your barnacles, your mussels, all of your crustaceans, right, so your lobster, everything like that, your corals, anything that's hard in the water, right, that has that shell, that's where it's coming from. The ocean has an overabundance of calcium. I mean, it's, you know, it's like for us in our bones. And it accrues, and so these organisms accrue calcium, they combine it with carbonate in the water, and then they grow their shell. So they get bigger, their shell gets harder and thicker. And so if we're putting these greenhouse gases in the mix, not only is water separately acidifying, but we're taking out, we're removing that combination of calcium and carbonate, because the hydrogen ion is taking on that carbonate right there, the CO3, and it's not being available. Okay, so that's what's happening in the ocean. And so to drive this point home, I'm going to show you something that's hopefully more straightforward. So you guys, that's a really short video, so go ahead and access it now and take a look, okay? It's like 2 minutes. Go for it. Yay. Okay, so everybody's done, hopefully. So yeah, it's really, let's see, Carolina. Yeah, great question. Yes, it's possible. You do see that. You're starting to see that in some organisms. Some organisms do really well. There are zones called upwelling zones. They're little hotspots of really acidic water that come up by the coast seasonally. So California has a spot in Monterey, and it's based on the world's ocean circulation currents, and so the Arctic water comes up, and a few times a year you get these upwelling zones that have all of a sudden a really harsh pH change, and organisms live there. One organism that lives there that I studied when I did marine research a few years ago. So I studied ocean acidification, and I was able to mimic ocean acidification conditions in these big aquarium tanks at the Stanford Hopkins Marine Research Center. in collaboration with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. And so what I looked at was purple sea urchins. And purple sea urchins, they have a calcified shell. You guys can Google them later, and they're spiny. They eat giant kelp that you see a lot in California, and so they live in these coastal upwelling zones. And the upwelling water is something that is projected probably in the next 100, 150 years. That's what the seasonal upwelling shows. And so I took those organisms and I gradually buffered and changed them and made the pH more acidic. And so what you see is just like the pictures towards the end of that article. I had a scanning electron microscope, and I'll try to show you these photos later. If you look at, so I examined the tube foot in that kind of sticks outside. That's like a sucker that sucks onto the surface on a rock, and that's how they're able to kind of hold on. And sometimes they move along the bottom, the sea bottom. And so if you examine really fine calcium structures, so inside that tube foot, which is generally mobile, it's like muscle, it's not calcified on top. But then inside on that podia, so where that sucker, kind of circular sucker, is on that foot, like what attaches to the bottom floor, that circle is it's a calcified crown looking thing. It's very thin. And so I just elevated the pH just a little bit more than those upwelling scenarios, and it started to break down. So that beautiful, beautiful crown of calcium carbonate just started to fragment, thin, and break away. And over time, if there's a very fine line of self-repair that the organism can take time to fix, given that not all of their tube feet are damaged right away at the same time. But then over time, if you keep elevating that pH, they do die. So it's a real problem. So the reaction is just a balance, Christian. It just depends on what's available. And so there should always be more carbonate and calcium floating. And so they combine. Whatever there is more of will start to combine with the live organism and with whatever compound, so to speak, the organism is providing. So it's the energy, it's not so much an energy, so to speak, thing, it's a balance thing. It's like, how many ions do we have of this versus that? So if there's more ions of one, then they will want to come back into equilibrium, just like hot and cold air. If you think about it, it's the same thing, right? So that's kind of what it is. So yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do now, so it's 12:40. So we're going to take a 15-minute break right now. So come back at 12:56, okay? And we'll continue on. So go ahead and break.
Yes. Yes. Nod your head if you can hear me. Okay. Great. So what we're gonna do now is you guys are gonna watch a video. It's a TED Talk video, and I won't say any more because I think it'll speak for itself. So it is. I'm gonna give you the link right now, and you're gonna watch it individually, everybody, by yourselves. Okay, and then just come back. So the video is it's 19 minutes, roughly 18, 19 minutes. So just come back after that. So at 1:20 my time. So just go ahead and come back. And I will give you the link right now. All right. So everybody got that? Just reply yes. Okay. So see you guys back in 20 minutes.